Captain Thin of the Zeon Galactic Patrol stood motionless in front of the main viewing screen. His tall, angular frame was stiff and tense. His green skin shimmered faintly under the dim bridge lighting, while his eye stalks quivered with what could only be described as an uneasy mixture of fear and disbelief. On the screen before him, the source of his distress lounged lazily in the center of the ship's cargo bay. It was a small creature with 4 legs covered in soft fur, slitted eyes that slowly blinked with complete indifference, and a tail that flicked occasionally from side to side. "What in the stars is that thing?" Thin muttered aloud, his voice low and tight with suspicion. He turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Clore, who stood beside him, also staring at the screen with furrowed brow ridges. Clore slowly tilted his head, his clawed fingers already dancing across the ship's biological scanner. He pulled up a holographic display filled with data and shook his head slightly. "Captain, there is nothing in our central database that matches this life form. All signs point to it being a domesticated creature, perhaps some form of companion animal, found in the wreckage of the human ship we recently salvaged." Thin narrowed his eyes that still fixated on the screen. "Companion animal," he repeated dubiously. "It consumed an energy rod like it was a midday snack. Our weapons have a hard time even denting those things." Clore nodded slowly. "I saw the footage too. Captain, it was not just chewing on it. Either the creature devoured it, it showed no signs of discomfort, no energy feedback, no radiation sickness. It acted as if it had simply eaten a soft meal." Thin's eye stalk stood straight up in alarm. "We cannot take chances." "Clore, what if this is a human bioweapon? What if they engineered this thing to look harmless, but it can tear through energy and metal with ease?" The creature on the screen yawned at that very moment, exposing a row of sharp teeth. Then it calmly curled into a tight ball, its fur rising and falling rhythmically as it emitted a soft, low sound that resonated through the ship's sensors. Clore tilted his head at the sound, adjusting the audio frequency. "That noise, Captain, it is repeating at regular intervals. It is neither harmful nor disruptive, but it seems to project a calming vibration, almost like a biological melody." Thin stepped back slightly, appalled, calming. "Are you suggesting this thing is trying to manipulate us?" "It is possible," Clore admitted quietly. His voice was laced with both curiosity and a hint of fear. "Many species have forms of psychological defense mechanisms. Perhaps this creature is emitting these sounds to lower our guards." "That is unacceptable," Thin declared firmly. "Send for the science division immediately. I want every available xenobiologist on board examining this thing before it takes over our emotions, or worse." Within minutes, a group of somber-faced scientists filed onto the bridge. They were Laxan specialists known for their caution and thoroughness. The leader was a grizzled elder named Vor, whose reputation for uncovering hidden biological dangers had saved more than one mission from disaster. They set up temporary monitoring equipment around the cargo bay, placing delicate instruments in strategic positions while keeping a safe distance from the creature, which appeared to take no notice of their presence. Vor spoke first after reviewing the initial readings. "Captain Thin, the creature is not emitting any harmful radiation. Its metabolic rate is incredibly low for an animal of its size. In fact, it seems to be in a state of passive rest, almost meditative, so it is conserving energy." Thin mused, hiding its real strength, perhaps lying in wait. "Unlikely," Vor replied, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "If it were suppressing its true capabilities, we would detect subtle changes in its bioelectric field. There is no evidence of that. It appears to be a simple life form. No advanced organs, no chemical weapon systems, just flesh and blood, and an unusually calm demeanor." Just then a transmission arrived from the containment wing. The human survivors from the wrecked ship had been revived, and one of them was being escorted to the bridge. It was Lieutenant David Harris, an officer who had handled countless first contact missions with calm precision. Thin turned sharply as Harris stepped onto the bridge, escorted by 2 armed guards. Harris wore a neutral expression. He seemed neither surprised nor concerned by the summons. "Human," Thin said, sharply pointing at the screen. "What is that thing we found in your cargo hold?" Harris followed the gesture, then broke into a slight smile. "Oh, you mean?" Whiskers! Whiskers! Thin repeated slowly as if the name itself was dangerous. Has a cat, Harris said simply. A domestic animal from Earth. Has a pet. Clore glanced between Thin and Harris. He ate one of our energy rods. Harris laughed softly. Yeah, they do that sometimes, if they think it's food. They are curious creatures. Cats like to explore. Bite, chew, bat, things around. It does not mean they are dangerous. Just weird little behaviors. Vor stepped forward, his voice cautious yet intrigued. You are telling us this creature is not a weapon. It is not designed to attack or deceive. Correct, Harris said confidently. Cats have been with humans for thousands of years. They are survivors. They adapt to new environments quickly, but they are not strategic killers. They mostly want food, a place to sleep, and maybe a warm lap. Thin stared at the screen. Whiskers had now rolled onto his back, his belly exposed. He looked utterly relaxed, yet his presence had put half the crew on high alert. That sound he makes, Clore asked, is it meant to control emotions? It is called purring. Harris said, it is a sign that the cat is happy. Comfortable content. Nothing dangerous about it, I assure you. Thin did not look entirely convinced, yet he could not argue with the science. So he ordered the continued observation of Whiskers, who now had full run of the cargo bay. Over the next few cycles, the creature adapted rapidly to its surroundings. It wandered the halls, stretched on console panels, and even brushed up against scientists who were brave enough to let him near. They reported no aggression, no erratic behavior, and no signs of contamination. In time, a strange shift began to occur. The crew who had once eyed Whiskers with suspicion now found themselves vying for the chance to feed him or play with a small ball they had retrieved from the human wreck. The cat had become more than a pet, more than a curiosity. He was becoming a member of the crew. One evening, Thin stood beside Harris watching a live feed of Whiskers, gently batting at a dangling string hung from a ceiling vent. Explain this, Harris, Thin said again. Not with facts, but with understanding. How can a creature like that disrupt our entire crew, change our perception so thoroughly? Harris smiled. You know, Captain, that is the thing about cats. They are not just animals. They are symbols. They represent peace, mystery, independence. And when they show affection, it feels like a gift, like something earned, not given freely. Thin considered this. Perhaps it is not the creature that is dangerous, but our ignorance of it. Exactly, Harris said. Understanding breeds peace. It bridges fear. From that moment, Whiskers was no longer referred to as the unknown entity on the manifest. He was Whiskers, a companion, a bridge between two species, once suspicious of one another. The crew began to document his actions, not as a threat, but as a subject of deep interest. He even received a proper living space filled with toys and soft bedding. Thin watched him often, now quietly studying the creature who had shaken an entire command hierarchy, with nothing but a flick of his tail and the hum of his purr. He had learned something important, something that could not be found in books or battle strategies. Sometimes the greatest unknowns come in the smallest packages, and sometimes the best diplomacy starts with a paw and a purr, the initial. Confusion over the mysterious creature soon gave way to a growing debate among the Zevian crew. Some still viewed Whiskers as a potential threat, while others began to see the creature as an odd but harmless curiosity. Captain Thin remained cautious, though his tone had softened since the humans had explained the cat was just a pet, not a biological weapon. Lieutenant Clore, however, continued to observe the animal with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Every time Whiskers moved across the cargo bay, his presence triggered a flood of activity from the scientific staff. They logged his movements, his reactions to different stimuli, and even tracked his eating and sleeping patterns. Vor, the lead scientist, had assigned 2 full-time researchers to shadow the cat around the ship, though. Whiskers seemed entirely unaware or simply did not care. He moved from one part of the cargo bay to another, stretching, napping, and occasionally playing with objects the crew had left lying around. Captain Thin found himself watching the live feed more and more drawn in by the simplicity of the creature. It was unlike any encounter he had previously experienced. Most new life forms the Zevians encountered were either defensive, aggressive, or entirely neutral. But this one seemed relaxed, unconcerned about its environment, and entirely at peace. "Is it truly harmless?" Thin asked aloud during one of the review meetings. "Or are we being lulled into complacency?" Vor adjusted his holographic tablet, flipping through pages. "Of data, I assure you, Captain. We have tested it in every way possible. We scanned its genetic material, monitored its vital signs, and subjected it to a wide range of environmental stimuli. It behaves like a perfectly normal mammal. There are no signs of advanced intelligence manipulation or biological enhancement." Clore was less convinced. That may be true before. But how do we explain what happened with the energy rod? That is not something a normal creature should be able to digest, let alone enjoy. Vor nodded. "We have not found an answer to that anomaly yet, but it is worth noting that the creature has not repeated that behavior, since it could have been an isolated incident, a mix of curiosity and accident." During a break in the analysis, Captain Thin invited Harris to join him in the command lounge, overlooking the vast expanse of stars beyond the ship. Harris accepted, bringing a small canister of Earth-based food for Whiskers. The cat followed at a leisurely pace, eventually settling into a cozy spot near the observation window. Thin gestured toward the cat. "Tell me, Harris, why would humans keep such creatures? What purpose do they serve? They cannot assist in combat or science or exploration." Harris looked down at Whiskers, who was now curled into a tight ball, eyes half closed. "We do not keep them for utility, Captain. Not everything humans value comes from purpose. Sometimes we keep animals for companionship, for comfort, for the joy they bring into our lives." Thin considered this. For comfort, he repeated. The concept seemed strange to him, but not illogical. "Yes," Harris continued, "cats in particular are independent. They do not require constant attention or care. Yet when they choose to be close to you, it means something. It means they trust you, and in that trust there is a kind of peace." Thin nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is why the crew is beginning to warm to him. He evokes a sense of calm in the midst of uncertainty." "Exactly," Harris agreed. "Sometimes that is more valuable than weapons or shields." Meanwhile, across the ship, Whiskers had become something of a local celebrity. Crew members stopped by the cargo bay during breaks to visit him. Some brought food, others simply watched him nap or stretch against the walls. One technician even crafted a small robotic toy that mimicked the movements of a mouse. Whiskers responded with enthusiasm, chasing it across the floor with surprising speed and precision. Despite the growing affection, some remained skeptical. Clore, in particular, kept detailed notes on every interaction he witnessed. If Whiskers so much as twitched his tail too quickly, Clore recorded it. If he jumped onto a panel or brushed against a power conduit, it was log cross-referenced and reviewed. "We still know very little about him," Clore argued during one staff briefing. "Just because he acts harmless does not mean he is. We should not let our guard down." Vor countered with data charts, graphs, and biological scans. "I understand your concern, Lieutenant, but I must remind you there has been no evidence of malice or threat. His readings remain consistent, his behavior predictable for a domesticated animal." Thin sat quietly listening to both sides. He looked again at the screen where Whiskers was grooming himself in the corner of the lab. As strange as it sounded, Thin was beginning to feel something he had not felt in a long time. A sense of peace. Perhaps Harris was right, he thought. Perhaps the true danger is not in the creature, but in our unwillingness to see beyond our fear. Later that cycle, Thin called another private meeting with Harris. This time they met in the captain's private chamber, where a small viewing monitor played live footage of Whiskers exploring the corridor just outside. "Tell me," Lieutenant Thin began, "have there ever been incidents where creatures like this posed unintentional danger to humans or other species?" Harris nodded. "There have been cases where pets acted unpredictably. They are animals after all, but nothing like what you are describing. Cats might knock, things over-scratch furniture or refuse to obey commands, but they are not violent, not unless they feel threatened." Thin tilted his eye stalks thoughtfully. "And you are certain they were not created as part of some human experiment?" "Absolutely not," Harris replied emphatically. "Cats have existed on Earth for thousands of years. Long before modern science, they evolved alongside us naturally. Over time, we formed a bond, and that bond grew stronger, generation by generation." Thin glanced at the footage again. This bond you speak of, it is emotional, not logical, correct, Harris said. And sometimes emotions can lead to deeper understanding than facts. In the following days, Thin took time to observe Whiskers directly. He sat quietly in the observation chamber, watching as the cat navigated the environment with grace and ease. Whiskers would sometimes pause as if sensing the captain's presence, then continue on his way with little care. It was during one such observation that Thin made a decision. He called Clore, Vor, and Harris into a strategy meeting. "We have spent cycles analyzing this creature," Thin said. "And while I do not believe we are in danger, I also believe we are overlooking something important." Clore leaned forward. "What would that be?" "Captain." "Understanding," Thin said simply. "True understanding. We treat the unknown as a threat by default. And while that instinct has served us well, it has also limited us. We feared this cat because we did not recognize him. We assigned danger where there was only difference." Vor smiled slightly. "That is a profound insight," Captain Thin nodded. "And I believe Whiskers has something to teach us. Something about ourselves, about the assumptions we make and the fear we carry." Harris looked at the captain with quiet appreciation. "You are learning what many humans have learned over centuries. Sometimes the smallest creatures hold the greatest truths." The meeting ended on a reflective note, and soon after, Captain Thin ordered a shift in protocol. Whiskers would no longer be referred to as a potential threat. He would be given a formal designation as an honorary guest on board, with access to certain non-restricted areas of the ship. The crew cheered at the news. A plaque was even made and mounted outside the cargo bay that read, "Guest of the Zevian Galactic Patrol, Whiskers Earth Origin Species, Domestic Cat." That evening, Thin stood once more in the observation lounge looking out at the stars. Whiskers sat beside him, tail flicking gently as he stared at the galaxy. "Beyond, we feared you," Captain Thin said quietly. "But in truth, it was our own ignorance that was dangerous, not you." Whiskers made no reply, of course. He merely blinked slowly and settled into a nap. And for the first time in a long while, Captain Thin smiled. It began as a routine patrol through a quiet sector of the galaxy. The Zevian vessel had just completed its analysis of the mysterious creature now known as Whiskers. The crew had started to grow comfortable around the small Earth feline, who had shifted from a source of terror to a quiet and curious companion. Even Captain Thin had adjusted to his presence, allowing the cat to roam more freely and even spend time in the control room during periods of low activity. Whiskers seemed particularly fond of the hum and vibration of the ship's systems. He often sat on the console near the navigation panel, curling into a ball and purring contently while officers carried out their tasks. At times, he would bat playfully at blinking lights or dangle his tail over the side of the dashboard. The crew now considered these behaviors to be normal, even endearing. It was during one of these calm cycles that the ship encountered something unexpected. A soft warning tone echoed through the bridge, followed by Lieutenant Clore's voice sharp and alert. "Captain, we are detecting a sudden shift in spatial energy directly ahead." Captain Thin turned immediately. "Show me the source." The view screen flickered and then displayed a swirling mass of light and motion, a shimmering anomaly that rippled across space with a kind of unnatural grace. The crew stared in silence as readings poured in. The energy levels were rising rapidly, unlike anything they had seen before. Clore analyzed the data at lightning speed. "It appears to be a spatial anomaly of unknown origin." "Captain, it is emitting gravitational waves and electromagnetic pulses across multiple frequencies." Thin straightened his stance. "Evasive maneuvers now get us out of range." The helmsman complied and the ship began to turn, but it was too late. A sudden pulse rippled from the center of the anomaly and caught the vessel in its wake. The ship shuddered, systems flickering as if being pulled by an invisible current. "Initiate full reverse, power divert, auxiliary systems." Thin barked. Clore moved quickly, trying to balance energy distribution, but the anomaly was pulling them in faster than they could counter. The ship lurched again, and the lights dimmed briefly before emergency power kicked in. At that moment, Whiskers, who had been lounging quietly on the command panel, suddenly leapt into action. He darted across the bridge with surprising speed and jumped onto the central console. His paws moved rapidly across the controls, tapping buttons and swiping across surfaces seemingly at random. Several officers moved to stop him, but froze as they noticed something unexpected. The ship began to stabilize. Each movement of the cat resulted in a corresponding system adjustment. Manual overrides disengaged automatically, and the engines responded with renewed force. The gravitational pull of the anomaly lessened slightly, allowing the ship to reorient itself. "What is he doing?" Thin demanded, eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't know," Harris replied, who had just entered the bridge, "but it looks like he is helping us." The bridge fell into stunned silence as Whiskers continued his work. His paws struck keys with uncanny precision, while his tail swished with purpose. He tapped a final control, and the ship jolted forward, pulling free from the anomaly's grasp just as the gravitational wave collapsed in on itself. The crew stared at the screen as the anomaly shrank into a single point of light and vanished, leaving nothing but normal starlight in its wake. Whiskers sat down on the console, licked one of his front paws, and then curled up again as if nothing had happened. Captain Thin turned slowly toward Harris. "Lieutenant, your creature appears to have just saved the entire ship." Harris could only nod, speechless. Clore stepped forward, checking the data logs. "The actions taken on the console match exactly what I would have input to escape the anomaly." He knew what he was doing. Captain Vore arrived moments later, having rushed from the lower labs. "What happened?" I felt the entire ship shudder. Captain Thin quickly brought him up to speed. "We were caught in an anomaly, and Whiskers took control of the ship. He performed all the correct navigational inputs and stabilized the systems. We are safe because of him." Vore looked from the captain to Harris to the now sleeping cat. "That is impossible." "That is what I thought," Thin replied, "but the data does not lie." The crew gathered in quiet clusters, reviewing sensor data and logs, while others whispered about the cat now being more than just a passenger. No one knew exactly what had happened or how to explain it. In the following hours, Harris and Vore worked together to examine Whiskers more closely. They conducted brain scans, monitored his nervous system, and measured any response to electronic signals. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Whiskers showed all the same biological markers of a healthy Earth feline. There were no implants, no enhancements, and no signs of external control. "This makes no sense," Vore muttered. "He has no neural implants, no genetic modifications, nothing that would account for this level of interaction with the ship systems." Clore was more focused on the anomaly itself. He analyzed its properties and found something that left him even more puzzled. The anomaly emitted energy patterns that resembled the brain activity Whiskers displayed during the incident. The frequencies were almost identical, as if the cat and the anomaly were somehow in sync. "Captain, I believe there is a connection between the creature and the anomaly," he said. Thin looked at the charts. "What sort of connection?" Unknown, Clore admitted. "But the similarities in the energy patterns are too precise to be coincidence." Thin turned to Harris. "Do you have any knowledge of cats reacting to spatial phenomena like this?" Harris shook his head. "Absolutely none. This is all new to me. Cats have been known to act strangely before storms or earthquakes on Earth, but never like this. Not on this level." The theory grew among the scientific staff. Perhaps Whiskers had an intuitive sensitivity to the anomaly. Maybe he was simply reacting on instinct in a way that just happened to work. Or perhaps something more profound was at play. As days passed, the ship maintained a safe distance from the last known location of the anomaly. Scans continued around the clock, while Whiskers resumed his usual behavior, seemingly unaffected by the ordeal. He napped, wandered, chased his toy, and purred in contentment. The crew continued to study him, but also treated him with a newfound respect. He had become more than just a mascot or curiosity. He was now seen as a guardian, a mysterious force of calm in an unpredictable universe. Thin found himself spending more time watching the cat, curious about the limits of what he might be capable of. Sometimes Whiskers would sit beside him in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars, as if contemplating the same questions. "What are you really, Thin?" whispered once as he glanced over at the creature. Whiskers responded by blinking slowly, then turning his attention back to the stars. Even the High Council grew interested. The captain submitted full reports on the incident, and the council's response was swift and filled with questions. They requested regular updates and wanted Whiskers closely monitored and protected. The Zevian scientists established a small lab near the control room where they could track Whiskers' movements without interfering with his routine. They used passive sensors to record brain activity and electromagnetic response, trying to capture any fluctuations that might hint at a deeper understanding. But nothing extraordinary presented itself. All tests pointed to the same conclusion. Whiskers was just a cat, an ordinary Earth feline. With an extraordinary moment that no one could explain, Captain Thin eventually gathered his senior officers for a quiet meeting. "The crew needs clarity," he said. "We must decide how we proceed. Do we continue treating this as an isolated miracle? Or is this something that requires a full investigation?" Clore was in favor of continued study. "He is connected to that anomaly somehow. We must uncover the truth." Vor agreed, but offered a more cautious perspective. "We cannot force conclusions from a single event. Let the data guide us." "And Harris?" Captain Thin asked. Harris sat back in his chair, considering. "I think Whiskers did what he always does. He observed, he felt something we couldn't, and he acted. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was something more. Either way, I think we should be thankful." Thin looked around the room, then nodded. "Proceed with ongoing study, but no invasive tests. Treat him as a guest, a hero, and a mystery." And with that, Whiskers became something greater than a shipboard animal. He became a symbol of possibility. In a universe filled with fear and danger, he had brought safety and wonder. As he sat quietly in the corner of the bridge, one paw curled under his body tail, flicking gently against the floor, the crew walked past him with small nods of respect. Their eyes no longer wide with fear, but filled with admiration and curiosity. No one could explain exactly what had happened, but everyone on board the Zevian vessel knew this. The galaxy was more mysterious than they had ever imagined, and Whiskers was a part of that mystery. Following the strange anomaly incident and the unexpected heroics of Whiskers, the mood aboard the Zevian ship began to shift. At first, the crew had been cautious, then curious, but now there was a kind of collective admiration that could not be denied. Whiskers had done something that no one else on board could explain. He had acted during a crisis with a clarity and precision that suggested something more than instinct. Whether it was intelligence, intuition, a mysterious connection to the anomaly, no one could say for sure. Captain Thin was the first to suggest a more formal change in how the crew treated Whiskers. During a senior staff meeting, he spoke clearly and without hesitation. "From this moment forward, Whiskers is no longer an unknown entity or subject of containment. He is to be considered a valued member of this crew, not just a research focus or passenger." There were no objections. The crew had already begun to feel that way for some time now. Whiskers was no longer just a mysterious creature from Earth. He had become a fixture on the ship, part of their daily lives. He moved freely through the halls, slipped into meetings, napped on consoles, and occasionally interrupted system scans with an accidental swipe of the paw, but no one minded anymore. The science team continued to monitor his behavior, but now they did so more like caretakers than analysts. Vor had even installed a soft mat near the observation window, just for Whiskers, a place where the cat would curl up and nap as the stars drifted past beyond the glass. Harris sometimes joined him, sitting quietly nearby. Lost in thought, Clore remained the most reserved about the shift. But even he could not deny that something had changed. The fear had melted into something softer: respect, maybe even admiration. Every time he passed Whiskers in the corridor and saw the cat glance up with those calm, unbothered eyes, Clore found himself pausing, not with suspicion, but with a kind of cautious wonder. There was one particular evening when the transition from fear to affection became undeniably clear. The ship was in a quiet sector, cruising through an expanse of purple and gold nebulae. The entire scene outside shimmered with color, reflecting off the ship's panels and washing the bridge in hues of violet and amber. Captain Thin invited Harris to the observation deck to discuss recent sensor data, but the conversation soon turned to other things. "Do you believe Whiskers knows what he did that?" Dathan asked quietly as the two men stood near the wide window. Harris looked down to where Whiskers was perched on the railing, eyes fixed on the nebula. "I think he knows he did something. I just don't know if he understands the scale of it. Cats are strange like that. They sense things, react to them, act on them, but they never seem to carry the weight of it." Thin nodded slowly, watching the creature. "And yet he has changed everything for us." "He has," Harris said simply. The conversation paused as they both watched Whiskers continue to stare out at the stars, his body still, his tail flicking lightly against the edge of the console. That night, the captain made a decision. He called a shipwide meeting, gathering the crew in the central atrium. Whiskers sat at his feet as he addressed the officers, technicians, and scientists who had all been part of the recent events. Crew members of the Zevian patrol vessel. Thin began. "We have encountered many unknowns in our service. We have faced dangers charted, unmarked regions, and interacted with alien species beyond count. But never have we been so challenged by something so small, so quiet, so seemingly simple." He looked down at Whiskers, who looked back once, then resumed grooming his paw. "This creature, who we once feared as a possible bioweapon, has instead become a symbol of unity, of curiosity, and of courage. He has taught us to question our assumptions and to embrace the unknown, not with fear, but with wonder." He paused, letting the words settle across the crowd. "From this moment forward, Whiskers will be recognized as a companion to this crew, a contributor to our mission, and a symbol of cooperation between our people and the humans." We once doubted applause broke out around the room. Soft at first, then building stronger. It was not just a formality, it was a moment of truth. The crew had grown together around this shared experience, and Whiskers had become the thread that bound them. After that day, things changed, subtly but undeniably. The crew started to include Whiskers in more than just analysis reports. Technicians left toys and cushions in the control room. Scientists timed their breaks so they could sit nearby and watch him play or nap. Some even kept personal logs of his daily habits, recording which corridor he explored, which crew member he followed, and where he chose to sleep. The control room became his favorite place. A large section near the central console was set up just for him, with a soft pad and a bowl of food Harris had replicated. From Earth ingredients, he often lounged there during critical operations, occasionally swiping at a loose wire or flicking his tail in amusement as the crew worked around him. Thin had a new chair installed near the console, one that allowed him to sit closer to the navigation controls and also closer to the cat. He did not say it aloud, but he felt safer when Whiskers was nearby. It was not logical, it was not scientific, but it was real. In time, the ship began to document Whiskers not just as a passenger, but as part of the mission logs. Reports referred to him as Crew Companion Designation WC01 Whiskers. He was given clearance to enter most non-secure areas and even received a small collar with a tracking chip, though it served more to reassure the crew than to restrict him. One moment stood out above all others in the weeks that followed. It was a quiet afternoon. The crew had finished a long shift mapping a nearby asteroid field, and many were taking their breaks in the central lounge. Whiskers was there too, stretched across a couch. His eyes half closed, Clore entered with a data pad intending to review anomaly readings, but paused when he saw Whiskers. There was a moment of hesitation, then slowly he approached and sat down nearby. Not too close, but not too far either. Whiskers glanced up, blinked slowly, and went back to resting. Clore looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "I still do not understand you, but I no longer fear you." It was not a grand declaration, not something broadcast to the crew, but it was real. It marked a turning point not just for Clore, but for everyone else who had once been afraid. From that day forward, Whiskers moved freely, not just in body but in spirit, no longer watched or studied, but welcomed and appreciated. The crew began sharing stories of their own pets back on their home planets. Some told tales of strange creatures with feathers or scales. Others spoke of dogs, horses, birds, even fish. But all of them now had a common reference point. Shared affection for a little Earth feline who had somehow found his way into the heart of their ship and their lives. And so Whiskers remained not as an experiment or a mystery to be solved, but as a companion, a guardian, and a quiet teacher. In the quiet spaces between stars, he reminded them that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it purrs. It was a quiet day aboard the Zevian ship, the kind of silence that suggested routine and normalcy. The crew moved with calm efficiency across the hallways and workstations. Everyone was at ease, not just because of the stability of their mission path, but also because of a new and unexpected presence that had become part of their daily rhythm. Whiskers, the cat from Earth, had slowly but surely made the starship his home. Whiskers had developed a special fondness for the control room. He liked the way the consoles hummed and blinked, the soft sounds of the engines, and the occasional warmth that came from power conduits. He often curled up in the command center, sometimes napping near the navigational controls, sometimes perched atop the main panel with his tail hanging over the edge. The crew had grown used to this Captain Thin, no longer saw it as a disruption. Instead, he found the cat's presence calming. There was something strangely reassuring about seeing Whiskers lying there content and purring while the ship floated through deep space. Then, without warning, the peace was shattered. An alert blared across the control room. Emergency tones rang out, red lights flashing as Lieutenant Clor's voice came through the comms sharply. Captain Energy Surge, detected near the outer edge of the nebula Thin, who had been reviewing reports in the adjacent briefing room, stood up at once and strode to the bridge. "Bring it up on the main screen," he ordered. The view screen activated, displaying the calm colors of the nebula, suddenly disrupted by a growing pulse of bright light. A wave of energy shimmered outward, the surrounding space distorting like ripples in. Water report Clor sensors show a massive spike in gravitational and spatial distortion. Clor replied, "It matches the frequency patterns from the last anomaly, but this one is stronger, unstable, and growing rapidly. Prepare evasive maneuvers," Thin ordered. "All power to engines, stabilizers at full." The crew jumped into action. The ship responded quickly, turning away from the anomaly. But the pull had already begun. Space seemed to bend around them. The vessel shuddered as if something invisible was grabbing hold and refusing to let go. Harris burst onto the bridge, having been called. The moment the alert went out, he saw the readings on the screens, the look on the faces of the crew, and then he saw Whiskers. The cat had been lying on the control console, but now stood on all fours. His ears were twitching, his tail flicked erratically, and his body was tense. He looked toward the screen, then back at the crew, then suddenly jumped. Whiskers leapt from the console to the floor and sprinted toward the main control panel, jumping onto it with a grace that startled even the most composed officers. Without hesitation, he began tapping his paws against the touchpad. His movements seemed random, but the system responded. Lights shifted, indicators moved. The ship's trajectory began to change. "Is he doing what I think he's doing?" Thin asked, his voice low and stunned. "It looks like he's adjusting course," Harris replied, watching in awe. The ship lurched again, but instead of spinning out of control, it slowly regained balance. The anomaly continued to pulse outside, but its pull was now weakening. The ship adjusted its heading, realigning with a stable corridor, and began to move away from the danger. Whiskers continued pressing keys with calculated movements. At one point, he stood completely still, as if listening to something, then tapped 3 commands in quick succession. Stabilizers online. Clor confirmed engines at 75%, and climbing were pulling clear of the anomaly. The energy field behind them shrank, receding back into the nebula as the ship moved beyond its influence. Whiskers sat down on the control panel, looked at the screen for a moment, then lay down, stretched out, and closed his eyes. The bridge went completely quiet. Thin took a deep breath, then turned to Harris. "Your cat just saved this ship again." Harris walked over and picked up Whiskers, cradling him gently in his arms. He looked into the cat's relaxed face and whispered softly, "I don't know how you do it, but thank you, Captain Thin." Addressed the entire bridge. "All data from the last 5 minutes needs to be compiled and analyzed. I want a full report on every system response, every command logged and cross-referenced. We need to know exactly what happened." Hours later, the crew gathered in the main lab. Clor, Harris, and several technicians reviewed the logs. The commands entered into the control panel were not random. They mirrored emergency protocols designed to counteract spatial instability, protocols that required advanced understanding of the ship's systems. "There is no way a normal creature could do this," Clore said, pacing back and forth. "This is not instinct, this is advanced action, guided by some kind of perception." And yet Vor replied calmly, "The bioscans remain unchanged. No signs of intelligence beyond what we have already measured. No neural enhancements. No artificial implants." "He's just a cat," Harris repeated. "But not just any cat, apparently." Thin entered the lab then, and everyone quieted. He walked over to the main console where the logs were displayed and scanned the data silently. After a long moment he spoke. "Whatever connection Whiskers has with these anomalies, it is not something we can define by science alone." "Not yet." Clore looked skeptical. "Captain, with all due respect, we cannot treat this as coincidence. There must be an explanation, and we will find it," Thin said. "But until then, we treat him as we would any crew member who went above and beyond. We respect his role and his actions." Harris looked down at Whiskers, who had followed him into the lab and was now rubbing his head against Vor's leg. "You saved us again, buddy," he said softly. The story spread quickly across the ship. This was not the first time Whiskers had acted in such a way, but it was the most dramatic. Crew members began to look at him differently now, not just with affection but with awe. People stopped him in the halls as if he could understand them. Some offered him treats, others bowed slightly in playful respect. He responded to it all, in the same calm, mysterious way, walking silently, blinking slowly, and curling up in his favorite spots. He became more than a companion, more than a curiosity. He became a symbol, a living reminder that not everything in the galaxy can be explained by logic or equations. Captain Thin scheduled a formal ceremony to recognize Whisker's contributions. It was small, not extravagant, but heartfelt. He addressed the crew gathered in the observation deck with the stars shining beyond the glass. "Whiskers has proven to be more than what we assumed he was," Thin began. "He has shown us that understanding does not always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it purrs at our feet or jumps on our consoles and guides us when we cannot guide ourselves." There was laughter and applause as Harris stepped forward holding Whiskers in his arms. To Whiskers, the crew cheered. From that point forward, Whiskers held an official title aboard the ship, Guardian of the Deck. It was mostly honorary, but it reflected what everyone felt he had earned it. And as the ship continued its journey through the stars, the cat remained at the heart of it all, quiet, unbothered, present. No one could say for sure what force moved within him or how he connected to the anomalies that threatened them, but no one questioned it either. They had seen what he could do, and that was enough. In the vast silence of space, sometimes the smallest voice speaks the loudest, and sometimes it purrs. The anomaly had vanished, but its mystery remained. The crew of the Zevian ship still felt the echo of its presence in the form of unanswered questions. It had come without warning, nearly torn them from their course, and then disappeared after a series of strange events led by the most unlikely of heroes. Whiskers, the Earth Cat, Captain Thin reviewed reports day and night. He read sensor logs, energy charts, navigational sequences, and every shred of technical data related to the anomaly in Whiskers' behavior. Nothing made complete sense. The data showed what happened, but not why it happened. Whiskers had done something extraordinary twice, and still all evidence said he was an ordinary feline. Clore could not let it go. He had grown quiet lately, spending more time in the analysis bay, studying fluctuations from the anomaly and comparing them to the energy patterns recorded in Whiskers' brain scans. His eyes grew tired and his posture slumped, but his determination only grew stronger. He brought his findings to Captain Thin and Vor early one morning. "Captain, I believe I have found something." They met in the secondary lab, where a large display screen showed two overlapping waveforms. Clore zoomed in and pointed. "These are readings from the anomaly when it first appeared, and this is brainwave activity from Whiskers. During the same time, the match is nearly perfect." Thin looked closely. "They are synchronized, not just synchronized," Clore said firmly. "They are responsive." Whiskers' brain activity shifted milliseconds before the anomaly did. It is as if he anticipated Its changes. Vor scratched his chin. But that is not possible. No Earth animal should have that kind of connection to space-time distortions, I know, Clore replied. That is what makes this so important. They brought Harris into the discussion, hoping for insight, but he was just as puzzled. Whiskers has always been a little different. He admitted he reacts to things before they happen. Sometimes noises, movements, even people approaching from another room. But this is on a different level. Thin walked slowly across the lab, then turned to face them all. We need to proceed carefully. This could be a natural phenomenon or something more. We do not know the full truth yet, but we owe it to ourselves to understand it. Over the next few days, the crew initiated a series of non-invasive tests. They exposed Whiskers to different environmental stimuli and measured his reactions. They simulated parts of the anomaly in a controlled lab using energy fields to recreate the patterns and observe the cat's behavior. The results were strange but consistent. Whiskers responded more to the simulated anomaly than to anything else. His ears would twitch, he would pace in circles or stare into the energy field with intense focus. He's sensing something, Clore said. I do not know what it is, but it is real. Harris spent more time with Whiskers than ever before. He watched how the cat reacted to people, noises, vibrations. He started to notice small things. Whiskers would leave a room seconds before an equipment alarm sounded or before a crew member sneezed. He avoided spills before they happened. And once he even batted a control switch that stopped a power overload from damaging a system. The crew was beginning to notice it too. They whispered in the corridors, shared glances during briefings, and some even began leaving small gifts near Whisker's sleeping area. Not out of superstition, but out of gratitude. One morning while the crew ran diagnostics on the outer hull sensors, Whiskers began acting strangely again. He moved from room to room, tail flicking rapidly, stopping at junction points and staring into the walls as if searching for something. Harris followed him, concerned. Captain, something is wrong. Thin joined them in the main corridor, watching as Whiskers stood still. Ears perked. Suddenly an alert rang out. The ship trembled. The same kind of spatial fluctuation from the previous anomaly pulsed through the structure. Clore yelled from the bridge. It's back, a new anomaly is forming before orders could be given. Whiskers bolted for the control room. He jumped onto the main console and began moving across the surface, tapping buttons, triggering responses the system accepted without protest. The ship responded instantly, stabilizers adjusting shields, realigning and propulsion shifting to compensate for the new gravitational wave. He is doing it again, Thin whispered, eyes locked on the cat. Clore ran in and checked the data. He is responding to the anomaly faster than our sensors can process. Harris stood ready but did not intervene. He trusted Whiskers now completely. Whiskers moved with confidence, his movements smooth and precise. Then after a final sequence, he sat down and looked directly at the screen. The anomaly faded, the ship remained steady. Everyone stood in stunned silence. Thin turned slowly to Clore. What just happened? Clore could barely speak. The readings they show, Whiskers predicted the anomaly sequence and compensated for it in real time. Vor stepped forward. I have seen impossible things in my career, but this is beyond all of them. Thin walked over to Whiskers, who was now cleaning his paw casually. This cat is more than a passenger. He is something else entirely. Later in the conference room, the senior crew gathered. We cannot deny it any longer. Thin said, this is not coincidence. This is not luck. Whiskers is connected to the anomaly somehow, and we must understand how and why. Clore presented more data, overlaying anomaly waveforms and Whiskers' brain patterns. Every spike, every fluctuation had a mirror in the cat's neural activity. They are the same, Clore said. He is not just reacting, he is part of it. Are you saying he caused it? Vor asked. No. Clore replied, but he may be linked to its existence. Somehow his presence and the anomaly are intertwined. Harris added softly, I do not think he is dangerous. I think he is a bridge. A bridge? Thin asked. Between what? Between us and the unknown. Harris answered. The room fell quiet. From that point on, the investigation shifted from analysis to discovery. The ship rerouted. its course to remain near the last anomaly location while maintaining a safe distance. The science team set up observation points and instruments. Whiskers remained free but closely monitored, not out of fear but out of respect. The crew continued their daily tasks, but everything felt different now. Whiskers was more than a pet, more than a symbol. He was the key to something larger, something beyond any of them. Thin sat in his private chamber late one night, staring out at the stars. Whiskers lay nearby, tail flicking. "What are you?" he whispered. Whiskers looked at him once, blinked slowly, then returned to his nap. It was not an answer, but it was enough for now. And so the ship pressed on through the stars, carrying with it a creature from a distant planet who held within him a mystery far older and far deeper than anyone had imagined. The cat that once inspired fear had become a symbol of unity, discovery, and hope. The journey back to the Xavian homeworld felt different this time. The ship flew through quiet space, steady and uneventful. Yet the air inside carried a kind of weight. It was not stress or fear, but something deeper, a sense that the crew had witnessed something they could not fully understand, yet could not deny. Whiskers, the Earth cat once considered a mysterious monster, now lay curled comfortably in the main control room. He had his own space now near the captain's chair, a soft cushion, a small tray of food, and a narrow perch that looked out into the stars. He spent most of his time there watching, resting, listening. Captain Thin passed by the observation deck one evening and paused at the glass beyond which the stars shimmered in silence. Harris stood nearby, his arms crossed, his eyes thoughtful. "Do you still think he is just a cat?" Thin asked without turning. Harris took a long breath. "I think he is a cat, but I also think he is something more now. Not because he changed, but because we changed the way we see him." Thin nodded. "That might be the wisest thing I have heard all voyage." Over the next few cycles, the crew completed all their logs, reviewed sensor data, and compiled their findings into formal reports. The High Council had already requested a full briefing, and Captain Thin prepared for the questions he knew would come. He stood before the central command relay that transmitted directly to the council chamber on the Xavian capital world. The screen lit up, and the image of Chancellor Zorak appeared dignified and serious as always. "Captain Thin, I trust your journey has yielded information worth our attention." "Yes, Chancellor," Thin replied calmly. "I believe we have encountered something extraordinary." Thin recounted the events in full detail, the anomalies, the energy surges, the near disasters, and Whiskers' involvement in each situation. He described the strange behavioral patterns, the predictive responses, the emotional shifts among the crew, and the undeniable connection between the cat and the unknown forces in space. Zorak listened without interruption. When the report concluded, he leaned forward slightly. "You are asking us to accept that a domesticated Earth animal, not genetically engineered nor artificially enhanced, influenced the fate of a Xavian command ship and possibly interacted with a spatial anomaly unknown to our science?" "Yes, Chancellor," Thin answered, "because that is exactly what happened." There was a long pause. Then Zorak spoke again. "We will review your findings in full. We appreciate your clarity and composure. You will submit all logs for further study. But for now, we commend you and your crew for your composure in the face of uncertainty." Thin bowed slightly. Transmission ended. Later that evening, the crew gathered one last time in the observation deck. They were nearing their homeworld and the journey would soon be over. Harris sat with Whiskers in his lap. The cat purred softly, eyes half closed as the stars drifted past. Clore approached, slowly holding a final report in his hand. He looked down at Whiskers, then back at Harris. "I still do not understand him, neither do I," Harris replied. "But maybe we are not supposed to." Clore nodded and sat down nearby. "For most of my life, I believed that understanding required control, that we had to explain everything or it had no place in our reality." "And now," Harris asked, "now I think there is value in the unexplained, in the things that challenge our assumptions." Captain Thin joined them a moment later. His presence quiet but grounded. "We came into this thinking we were the explorers, the superior minds. But Whiskers reminded us that humility is just as important as intelligence. Sometimes the universe speaks in a whisper, not a roar. The rest of the crew filled the room slowly, conversations quiet but filled with reflection. They shared memories of their time with Whiskers, each one a moment that had changed how they saw the world. One technician remembered how Whiskers sat beside him during an engine malfunction and somehow calmed his panic. Another recalled how the cat had led her away from a malfunctioning door seconds before it jammed shut. A junior officer spoke about a time he felt homesick, and Whiskers had climbed into his lap as if sensing his need. And though none of these moments could be explained, they were all real. They mattered when the ship finally touched down on the Zevian capital world. The crew was met with honor not for surviving the anomaly, but for something greater, for showing that understanding is not always about knowledge. Sometimes it is about empathy, patience, and the willingness to see beyond the obvious. Whiskers stepped out into the bright light of the landing bay, his paws silent against the metal floor. Hundreds of Zevians stood in attendance. Scientists, officials, soldiers, and civilians. All of them had heard the story. The cat walked without fear. His tail flicked lazily, his eyes calm. He stopped only once to glance at Captain Thin, who stood proudly nearby, then continued walking as if he owned the path beneath him. A small child approached hesitantly, the only non-military figure present. She knelt beside Whiskers, reached out a hand, and waited. Whiskers looked at her, blinked slowly, and stepped forward, gently rubbing his head against her palm. The crowd watched in silence. And then something remarkable happened. They smiled. It was not a moment of scientific breakthrough or military triumph. It was a moment of connection, and that was the greatest discovery of all. In the end, Whiskers taught them something they never expected to learn. Not about the nature of anomalies or the boundaries of science, but about themselves. He showed them that fear often comes from what we do not understand, that bravery is not always loud, that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most unlikely teachers, and maybe that applies beyond ships and stars. Maybe in our own lives, we too are surrounded by mysteries we overlook, by people or creatures or moments that seem small but carry deep meaning. Maybe we just need to slow down, listen, and see. Because sometimes the most important truths are not hidden in equations or machines. Sometimes they are curled up quietly, purring in the corner of the room.